Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's neighborhood meeting. I know you can't see me right now, but my name is Tyler Butler, and I'm a planner with the city's Development Services Department. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to present to you, the neighborhood, a development concept being considered by the owner of the development team of 435 Ann Street and 33 Harrison Crescent, prior to a formal development application being submitted. So this is part of our complete application process, and this provides an opportunity for us, the development team, and the proponent to hear initial community feedback and incorporate it into their plans prior to making a full and formal development application to the city. So their required report, called a planning justification report, will detail what's heard tonight, and that forms part of their application. So we are recording this meeting tonight for the public record, and the recording will be used for the purpose of garnering your input to respond to inquiries, and it will be considered public information. So please also be aware that as a registered attendee tonight, your mailing and or email address will be added to the mailing list so that you can receive further information about this application as it progresses. Should you have any questions regarding this collection of your information, please contact the Development Services Department, and we can let you know why we do it and ensure that it's safeguarded for you. So there are some staff behind the scenes tonight, as we're well aware, helping me out and managing the technology, and they're here to make sure this meeting can run as smoothly as possible, to grant participants the opportunity to speak and to assist with any questions in the chat. So please bear with us. We are having some technical issues tonight, but if for some reason you get disconnected, please feel free to log in again, and we will do everything we can to get you back in a timely fashion. So the intent of tonight's meeting is to provide members of the public with an opportunity to become familiar with the development application and the planning review process, and also to ask the applicant and the city some questions so that we can provide you some feedback. So what can you expect tonight? Well, you're going to get a brief overview of the city's process and timing. You're going to get a presentation from the applicant's representative describing their proposal, and you're going to have an opportunity to ask either the applicant or city staff some comments or identify any concerns you may have with the application. What not to expect tonight? There will not be recommendations on the application or a detailed analysis on the proposal. This occurs later in the process once we receive a formal submission. And we are not going to be having a debate on the merits of the proposal between the city staff and applicant tonight as well. So what are those next steps in the planning process after tonight's meeting? So ultimately, this neighborhood meeting, as I've kind of noted, is the first step to ensure that local concerns are heard and incorporated or addressed through the city's review. And after this meeting, we do expect that the applicant will make a formal submission for this development project. So formal submissions, zoning bylaw amendment applications, undergo a full technical review and must address comments received from this neighborhood meeting, from the city's technical departments and external agencies, and from members of the public more broadly. So in conjunction with this, there will be another statutory public meeting that will be held on the application at Affordability Committee. And that meeting will be in person and not on Zoom. However, you can also participate through YouTube on that one. So as part of that public meeting, members of the public have an additional opportunity to provide verbal and or written comments. Now, following that public meeting, staff will continue to review and process the applications and will make any necessary revisions to the development proposal. And once that review process has concluded, a staff recommendation report will be brought forward to council for their consideration. And tonight we are joined by Ward 4 Councillor Amy Courser. So good evening to you, Councillor Courser. Again, all comments received through this neighborhood meeting and the public meetings will be addressed, and there will be a section within the staff report that the public can view to see to ensure that your comments were heard and incorporated into the overall decision. So I'm going to move on now to the applicant's presentation. And the planner, we've got here Greg Barker from Innovating Planning Solutions, and they are going to show you guys this proposal that is proposing to rezone the lands located at 435 Ann Street North and 33 Harrison Crescent from agriculture general to a residential multiple dwelling with special provisions, and residential multiple dwelling first density with special provisions, likely to facilitate the construction of what right now is proposed at a 96 unit development. So I'm going to hand meeting control over to Mr. Greg Barker from IPS, and that will be all you'll hear from me until his presentation is finished. And then after that presentation, we're going to open it up to comment, and that comment portion will not be recorded. All right. So if my IT team could take me away and put Greg to be the star of the show, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Tyler. Appreciate that, and I appreciate the technical challenges as well. I'll do my best to get through this. Of course, we can make this presentation available after tonight's meeting if anyone wants to reach out and obtain a copy. My name is Greg Barker. Good afternoon to everyone who has signed in. I'm a partner with Innovative Planning Solutions. We represent the landowner, and we have been retained to prepare an application for a zoning bylaw amendment on lands known as 435 Ann Street North and 33 Harrison Crescent. This will, if approved, this would facilitate residential development on the property. I'll get into more of the details through my presentation. I do want to note I have additional staff members from our office on the call listening in as well. They are going to be taking notes and hearing all comments raised so that we have a record of that, and we can ensure any questions that are outstanding are addressed moving forward with a formal application. And just to reiterate what Tyler, Mr. Butler had to say is we understand there are no recommendations being made today. We are here to hear your comments and hear your concerns, and not so much a debate necessarily. An application has not been submitted to date. This is the first introduction of this concept to you, the neighborhood and the public, for informal feedback. Next slide, please. So the property is made up of two separate properties with the Ann Street lands, historically known as the Hickling Estate, at 435 Ann Street. These lands were sold to the current owner towards the end of 2023, along with a small remnant piece of land known as 33 Harrison Crescent, which was acquired in early 2024. So that's a triangular piece right on the curve of Harrison Crescent on the northeast side of the property. Collectively, the property has an area of 2.8 acres or 1.1 hectares. There's 130 meters of frontage on Ann Street and 111 meters of frontage on Harrison. And aside from the existing accessory building on the lands, as many of you likely know if you live in the area, they're vacant with sporadic tree and vegetation cover. The former dwelling on the property was demolished in February of this year with a demolition permit from the City of Barrie. Next slide, please. So this slide here, this illustrates some of the surrounding land uses. They're primarily residential within the city limits and more rural or agricultural within Springwater to the north, including the Barrie Air Park located to the north and to the west. And this slide, on the legend, you'll see the red line representing the City of Barrie boundary just to the north, sort of wrapping around the city, and a clear distinction between more urban and rural development between the two municipalities. Some additional uses include places of worship, schools, parks, as well as a small commercial plaza to the south of Livingston. And Livingston also has, there's access to public transit as well as bike lanes on Livingston. And then going further to the east is Bayfield Street, which offers a variety of community amenities for day-to-day living. And just from a road classification perspective, Ann Street is considered an arterial road in the city's official plan, where Harrison is a local road, and Hanmer, located just to the south of the property, is a local collector road. Next slide, please. And so we've prepared a development concept, and I can appreciate it may be hard to read some of the labels and some of the information. I'd be happy to pull up a full screen image of this if needed during the question and comment period. But we have prepared a development concept for this property. It consists of a total of 96 units. Of those 96, there are 84 stacked back-to-back townhomes, 4 single detached dwellings, and 8 semi-detached dwellings. The singles and semi-detached, they would be accessed from Harrison Crescent. So they're on the right-hand side in the orange and yellow shade, while the townhouses would be accessed solely from Ann Street with no through access between Ann Street and Harrison Crescent. The 84 townhouses, they are intended to be within a condominium corporation, along with the 128 parking spaces that are provided in the concept plan. There are landscape buffers, private outdoor amenity areas, as well as private condo roads, in addition to the surface parking areas proposed. And of those 84 units in the townhouse piece, 9 of them are located in Building E. That's sort of that pink square in the north end of the site. Those units are intended to be made affordable through a partnership with Habitat for Humanity. So should this application and this development be approved, a partnership would be entered into with Habitat, and those units would be made affordable through that organization. Next slide, please. And so very quickly, just on this slide, it's the concept plan. It sort of color codes the built forms. The purple and the red, they represent the stacked back-to-back townhouses. These are proposed as 4-story buildings with a height of 14.3 meters being proposed. The 4th story is a recessed rooftop amenity space, which I'll show shortly in the renderings. And then the blue color code represents the semi-detached dwellings, and then the orange are the single detached dwellings. Both of those built forms are proposed as 2 stories with single car garage and surface 1 single car parking on the driveway. Next slide, please. So the following few slides are a handful of 3D renderings that have been produced for this concept. The intent is to provide an illustration or an idea of what the project will look like ultimately. So this image here, this slide shows the site looking northeast along Ann Street, showing the townhouse units fronting onto Ann Street. Next slide, please. And then again, this is a similar view, just raised up a little bit higher. Ann Street's on the left-hand side, looking north and east from the northern site entrance, which is sort of on the bottom right corner of the image. Next slide, please. And then this view, this is facing south and west with the block of affordable housing units. As I mentioned, the Building E, or the 9 units in the foreground. With the dwellings on Harrison Crescent on the left, and I mentioned about the 4th story recessed rooftop amenity area. You can see that there on the building in the foreground, and how the wall is recessed from the main wall. It's sort of set back to try to mitigate any height concerns. Next slide, please. And then this view, this is facing north along Harrison Crescent. This is showing the semi-detached dwellings in the foreground with the townhouse dwellings in the background. Next slide. And here, this rendering is this is a bird's eye view facing southwest with Harrison Crescent in the foreground, the curve along Harrison Crescent in the foreground, and then the townhouse units in the background. And next slide, please. And then this final image shows the proposed single detached dwellings along Harrison Crescent. It's a view sort of facing west, maybe southwest, with the townhouses in the background as well. Next slide, please. So from a planning perspective, the image on the left is an excerpt from the City of Barrie official plan, and the subject lands and surrounding lands you can see in the yellow are designated as a neighborhood area. And the neighborhood area, just very generally, permits developments ranging from a minimum of 50 units per hectare to 149 units per hectare, as well as up to 6 stories in height in this particular location. There are some criteria for greater heights, and there are some criteria for lesser heights. But in this case, I had mentioned Ann Street being an arterial road. And the official plan allows for building heights up to 6 meters where they front onto arterial roads. And this application is proposing 4 stories for the stacked townhouses. And under the current zoning bylaw, as Mr. Butler mentioned, they're zoned agricultural. This may be one of the last, one of the remaining agriculturally zoned parcels in the city. So for people who live in this area, that's indicative of the historical use of the property. And there just aren't very many agricultural zones or parcels remaining. Next slide, please. And so as mentioned by Mr. Butler, we are proposing a zoning bylaw amendment application. And this slide just very generally illustrates we're proposing to zone from the agricultural zone to 3 different zoning categories based on the built forms being proposed. So the townhouses, we're proposing an RM2 zone with special provisions. The semi-detached, we're proposing an RM1 zone with special provisions. And then the single detached, we're proposing the R3 zone with special provisions as well. Next slide, please. So I'll very briefly walk through the special provisions we've identified to date based on the built forms. So this table here on the left-hand side is a zoning matrix. It identifies the required provisions on the left, and it identifies the proposed provisions we are considering on the right. And the items that you see highlighted are matters that we are proposing to be considered for special provisions. So for the townhouse block, the proposed RM2 zone, we are looking for provisions relating to front and rear yard setbacks, increased lot coverage, height, and density over the current zoning requirements. Next slide, please. And then for the semi-detached, similar special provisions are being proposed for reduced lot area, frontage, rear yard setback, and front yard setbacks for the garage. Next slide, please. And then lastly, these special provisions relate to the proposed single detached. Again, they relate to lot area, rear yard setback, as well as the front yard setback to the garage. Next slide, please. So we've had pre-consultation meetings with the City of Barrie and the various departments, including planning staff. And through that process, the city's identified a number of technical studies as being required should we proceed with a formal and complete application. And those studies are listed here on this slide. So there's roughly, 9 of them, 9 separate and independent studies. All of this work is currently underway. Nothing has been completed to date. Part of the process, particularly with the planning justification report, which IPS will be preparing, needs to consider, the feedback that is provided tonight and any comments and concerns. So we are, like as I mentioned, we are taking stock of comments that will follow in order to ensure they're adequately addressed in our submission for a complete application. Next slide, please. So to summarize, we are considering a zoning bylaw amendment application. This would facilitate the development of 96 residential units on the property, including a range of units being stacked back-to-back townhouses, semi-detached, and single detached dwellings. The development would provide for 9 affordable housing units through partnership with Habitat for Humanity. while also providing for intensification in proximity to supporting land uses in a manner that we currently believe conforms to the city's official plan, as well as all other levels of planning policy. Next slide, please. Yes, and so that concludes my presentation.